Payment System, SIIPS, report in Africa is highlighting the extraordinary growth of instant payment systems, IPS, across the continent and exploring the impact of this on financial inclusion. As Africa continues its digital transformation, there are 31 live IPS in 26 countries and another 27 nations preparing to launch their own systems. The report paints a picture of a rapidly evolving financial ecosystem that holds immense promise for Africa's underserved communities. The report was launched in November in Accra, Ghana, in partnership with AfricaNenda, the World Bank, and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Well, the Deputy CEO at AfricaNenda, Akinwale Goodluck, joins us now in the studio for more on this. Thank you so much for joining us on Network Africa.
It's an absolute pleasure, Laya.
Well, let's begin with the difference between last year's report and this year's report on SIIPS. How has the instant payment system, the landscape in Africa evolved since last year's report?
I think we're seeing significant and considerable progress. We're seeing that there's a greater understanding of the difference between instant payment systems and inclusive instant payment systems. Africa is trending in the right direction. We're seeing more and more payment systems across the continent begin to introduce a lot more inclusivity features. So it's helping to deepen financial inclusion around the continent. We have seen new IPSs come on board. We have seen about 3 of them declassified for not meeting certain conditions, like perhaps they're not operating 24/7, or they have other issues that cannot help them to be regarded as full and inclusive IIPS. So we're headed in the right direction. There's a lot of work going on at the regional level. A lot of countries are also coming together. So we're seeing TISIP doing quite well. PAPS is also on board. We're seeing GMAC supporting and servicing Central Africa. And hopefully next year we will be able to add BCIO, the WEMU interbank payment system too.
Well, just very quickly, for the benefit of those who are not really familiar with what SIIPS is, just give us a brief on that.
All right, perhaps I can start with, first of all, AfricaNenda is a financial inclusion accelerator. It is wholly funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And what keeps us awake at night is just how can we deploy payment systems that serve the bottom of the pyramid, that serve vulnerable people in Africa, that serve women, that serve our young people. Today, there's still about 400 million people who are excluded in Africa from digital payments, and digital payments are a key ingredient for economic and social inclusion. So in terms of the differences, I would say that we've seen a lot of progress. Things are happening really, really quickly. We're seeing a lot of central banks, national switches really coming on board. We are seeing a big growth in transaction volumes. If I look at 2023 for Africa, we had about 49 billion transactions, equal to about $1 trillion. So that's a significant improvement in terms of value and in terms of volume.
Well, hinging on your comment about progress, the report, highlights progress, but then it mentions that no instant payment system in Africa has really fully achieved inclusivity. So what are the barriers to this and how can it be overcome?
Well, I think the payment systems in Africa have done very, very well. Perhaps they could also do a better job in terms of telling their own story. We've seen in the payment system, in the payments world, where people who have just come on board are telling their story better and making it look like Africa is playing catch up. Meanwhile, Africa has had instant and inclusive payment systems for quite a few years. We said that none in Africa has achieved full maturity. And the main primary driver for that is usually around, the biggest concern will be access for user recourse, is mechanisms for users, is for able to like if there's been a mistake, if there's been fraud, how are they being supported? How long do they have to wait to get their money back? What kind of protection is made for them around digital literacy, financial literacy, from fraud, etc.? But if I look at the landscape in Africa today, quite a few are headed towards that mature stage. NIPS, the Nigerian Interbank Payment System, is one of the most advanced, if not the most advanced, on the continent. It meets all the criteria except for the criteria around recourse for customers. I think GIBS in Ghana is also looking and trending well. We expect to see more and more payment systems across the region also headed from basic to progress and ultimately to mature.
All right, you mentioned central banks, earlier, and regulators. What role do they need to play in this, in fostering a seamless trans-border transaction that we can see between countries in Africa?
Well, look, cross-border payments are fundamental, and I think that Africa is taking a very holistic approach to it in terms of, one, encouraging regional economic communities, encouraging financial common currencies across the regions. We're seeing that participation of central banks, national switches in the governance of the instant and inclusive payment system is a key fundamental requirement to grow across the inclusivity spectrum. Central banks have a lot of work to do, working with other organs of government in terms of regionalization, in terms of policy harmonization, in terms of helping to set up the structures and the dependencies for cross-border trade, so customs, policy alignment, and all the other things that help to drive regional trade.
All right. Well, final question to you will be: which countries have we seen that are currently leading, in adopting inclusive payment systems, and are there lessons from their success to, other countries that are yet to reach that level?
Well, we have seen countries like Brazil do quite well with PIX in terms of volume, in terms of players, and it's done very, very well. But in Africa, I think Ghana is doing quite well. Nigeria is doing very well too. We've seen PaySharp launch in South Africa. We've seen, what M-Pesa is doing in Kenya. So there's a lot of progress across several markets on the continent.
All right, then we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much, Deputy CEO at AfricaNenda, Akinwale Goodluck. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Layo.